how we will move forward with respect to this course. So a quick message from my side to everyone attending this call about how this certification course would be. So it's a FHIR oriented course which will cover from very basics to maybe intermediate level of FHIR knowledge, and it will include concepts such as resources. So those who are new to FHIR, resources could be a new concept, but we'll see around how those resources are, then the way we move forward. Profiling, slicing, these comes into advanced topics. But no worries, these terms might be new to you as of now, but as we go along the course, then you will be able to relate all those details. Again, it would be around 30 hours plus minus 5 hours online course. It will be there, and it will be live webinar training that we are connected through online forum. That how we will go along, and every session will have some hands-on assignments, so that will build our function knowledge as well as technical knowledge around FHIR, how to implement those. And every second or third session will have a QA kind of session, or maybe a review of assignment kind of session, so that we can integrate what has been covered in previous 2 sessions, or anywhere during the course you feel like a lot has been covered, and something has to be reviewed or something has to be discussed in detail, then we can plan that kind of session there. And at the end of the course, there is a mock test. This mock test is in alignment with how a FHIR R4 certification exam would be. And also this particular mock test would be kind of a question bank for you. I suggest to take this mock test after 3 weeks of this course, so that you have enough time to prepare for that. But again, it depends on mutual understanding. Then you feel much more comfortable to take this test. Few expectations. So attend all live sessions. This would be important in the terms that every session will be built on previous session. So I'll cover some basics today, and then we build on that basic to next session to cover some more topics. That's why it will be much easier to integrate different sessions and complete all assignments. This is very much would be required for a beginner or a newbie who is into healthcare or FHIR. I know, because this is where the integration of knowledge will happen. The theoretical concept that we'll discuss, this is something where you will be able to correlate between different concepts. It might require 6 to 10 hours per week of yours. So 5 days a week anyway we will be doing the course. The remaining 1 hour to 3 hours would be extra based on how much time you will be needing for the assignments. Pace of the course would be designed is designed considering that there are participants who are new to FHIR or new to healthcare as well. So those who already have some experience in the healthcare, please bear with us on that front, because it might take some time to pick up the pace who are new to FHIR. And ask questions whenever you feel like it will be helping other students as well to uncover questions and areas. And this is a course schedule. This is basically I have designed for myself, and a quick give you a quick idea about how different topics will be covering day by day. Again, if FHIR is new to you, you might not able to relate these kind of topics. For example, FHIR resource concepts, finding out right resources, then how to build resources, these CRUD operations. If you are aware of RESTAPI, then you can understand what CRUD operations are and how FHIR can be implemented around that, and how can you query or search a particular data in that is stored in the background in terms of FHIR. So those different topics would be there. I'll not bore you with these topics, but this is how we'll cover day by day. And this is for my reference, so that we don't get stuck in a particular topic, and we should keep moving forward. So we'll jump into FHIR, and these are the few topics that we'll cover between day 1 and day 2. We'll see how much we can cover in day 1, and then whatever is pending we'll cover in day 2. So first of all, what is FHIR? In short, FHIR is a healthcare standard. Now, how much you are aware of healthcare? The question might come: what is healthcare standard? If you're new to healthcare, that the first question comes, and why do we need a standard around it? So, if we go officially or formally, the definition of healthcare standard is that there are rules that can govern how a patient information is electronically stored and interchanged. There are two aspects here. One is storing, and there is another aspect that is interchanging. And there are rules around that governs this. But for a moment, let's keep this formal definition aside and let's try to understand from a very layman language what is healthcare standard and why do we need a healthcare standard. So information communication is a key component in any system. By this, what we mean is that when we see a healthcare system, there are different systems, there are different departments that communicate each other. For example, there is an administrative department that registers a particular patient. Then there is general practitioners who attends a particular patients and give or forward the patient according to the state of patient. Then there is lab department where ultrasound scans, CT scan, MRI scan, or maybe other lab test happens. Yeah, and the informations keep on exchanging. For example, in traditional practices, the patient carries the report from lab department to the general practitioner, and then general practitioners review the report, gives his or her comments, and then some medications are suggested. Then this medication statement or information is carried to the pharmacy, and the pharmacy guy provides or issues the medications that are suggested for the patient. So it is nothing but an information communication is happening between different systems, or we can say different people, or we can say different departments. Now, what problem it is in current scenario is that these different department or hospitals have different devices or different systems from different vendors. For example, it is very highly unlikely to have a particular hospital only devices from Philips or maybe just from Siemens. In a particular department, you will see devices from GE, from Siemens, from Philips, and these different vendors uses different formats or different terminologies to represent the same data. For example, let's suppose MRI scan is there. Okay, MRI scan would be related to image, but let me take some example of a textual data. Let's suppose this blood test report has been done for a particular patient in a lab department, and hospital A represents this lab data in terms of a normal textual format, but this lab has this report is being viewed by a general practitioner system in, let's suppose, JSON format or in CSV format. So different formats would be there in for different systems. That issue would be there. And as I mentioned, different systems could use different terminologies to represent the same data. For example, let's suppose there are a system A and system B. Both are representing the same information. For example, this is the identifier of a patient or unique ID of a patient. So system A uses the element unique ID, while system B uses the element identifier. The other variation could be that system A understand MALE as a valid value for a gender, while system B understand capital M as a valid value for a gender. Now, as a human, if I look at this information, I can make out that okay, unique ID could be identified for system B, and MALE could be equivalent of capital M for system B. But how systems will understand each other if they have to communicate within themselves accordingly? Because the idea of healthcare is to move digitally during these days. In that case, human aspect has to be replaced by systems only. The system has to understand each other so that this data can be communicated fluently and efficiently among each other. Now, there are two ways to solve this solution. There are two ways to solve this problem. One is have an interface in between. For example, this particular interface will map these values. For example, system A wants to communicate to system 2, and this system will say that okay, if data is flowing, this data will flow to and fro using through this interface, where it says that okay, unique ID is equivalent of identifier for system 2, and vice versa. Same goes for that, the another example that I've taken is test. So system A understand BP as blood pressure, while system B understand blood pressure, BLOOD, PER, the whole spelling as blood pressure. Then again, how the system will know that BP is equivalent of blood pressure in system B. So this is what this interface will do. This interface will map it, and this is how we can solve this communication problem between system 1 and system 2. This is one way of doing it. The another way of doing is that let's provide a universal guideline that the component that I want to use. Sorry, let me minimize this one. Okay, okay, so this is one way of solving the problem is having an interface in between the two systems, and act as a middleware or broker between these two systems. The another way is let's issue a universal guideline that for identifier, let's use the keyword this only instead of going for any random element. For example, here system A has went for user unique ID, maybe system C could go for user ID or maybe just ID. So instead of that, let's assign a guideline that let's use this particular keyword only for any to represent any value that uniquely represents a patient. So this is called standardization. In standardization, what we are doing, we are defining few terminologies and few rules around how a particular data should be represented. Same goes for representing the terminologies. For example, maybe we can fix that for blood pressure we have to only use BP. So when system 1 and system 2 says that we adhere to these guidelines, in that case it means they understand identifier only as this particular element, not this one. Same way they understand BP as blood pressure, they don't understand this as a valid value. So this is called standardization. Now, how FHIR as a standard is useful to us. So first, defines the format. For example, we have not considered a case where of the formats here, but let's suppose system A communicates this information as a CSV format, while system B understand or communicates this information as XML or maybe a plain text. So this is another challenge that this particular interface has to solve. For example, if CSV is being is an output of system 1, and then CSV has to be converted to a plain text or maybe XML so that system 2 can understand. So what FHIR does is FHIR defines the format that if you are adhering to FHIR, then you can use only these formats: JSON, XML, and RDF. RDF is something maybe new to you for the first time, but for the sake of knowledge, let's place it here. We'll understand what RDF is at a point of time. But there are 3 standards that FHIR supports: JSON, XML, and RDF. And then FHIR, the another thing that FHIR does is uses terminologies. As I mentioned, we can issue guidelines where we can represent blood pressure as BP instead of having an ambiguity, and leave the space for different systems to use different terminologies. Let's fix that. So that what FHIR does, FHIR uses different terminologies. For example, Snowman and Loanic are different organizations which issues these codes for different terminologies. So Loanic is basically provide codes or fixed values for lab results. For example, a CT scan of X-ray. Then if you go to the Loanic dictionary, you will say that there is a particular code that is assigned for that particular result. For example, there has to be a CT scan of brain, then that particular test will be assigned a particular code. The same goes for SNOMED. So SNOMED can have codes or fixed values for any clinical terms, whatever that comes in a healthcare domain. Again, while we work with FHIR, we'll cover these learning and SNOMED and how these are integrated with FHIR. So this way, FHIR is addressing the problem of format, and FHIR is also addressing the problem of terminologies. The another thing that we need to think of here is why among these two solutions, this is preferred one. Because if we go with the interfaces, there is a cost involved to maintain this interface. You will have a particular a set of team who will manage this interface, and as the complexity goes, this interface would become more complex. For example, we have considered only two cases here. First one is there is a difference in the element name, how same information is represented. Then there is difference in terminology as well, how a particular information is represented here in terms of terminologies. For example, some systems might understand cardiac arrest while the other system might understand heart attack, although both are the same states. But still, for a system, how a system will identify with these two are the same things. And then the complexity will be much more if the format is itself totally different. For example, as I mentioned, this could be CSV, then this could be XML or a plain text. Now let's suppose system 1 also communicates with system C. Then system C will have their own set of elements, will have their own set of terminologies, and might be using another format. So now system to enable the communication between system 1 and system 3, then we have to maintain another interface. So that's how the scalability of interface will keep on increasing, and the more number of interfaces will have, the more cost it will be involved, the more management will be involved, more monitoring will be involved. That's why having a standard is more preferred way. It decreases the cost. It makes it more effective and efficient as well. Now, when it comes to information exchange, two things becomes very much important to define, to standardize. One is syntactic and another is semantic. Syntactic is nothing but the grammatical rules around information exchange. For example, in which data format it has to be communicated, what could be the name of the element. As I mentioned, use identifier instead of unique ID or user ID. So defining those kind of things. Then defining repetitiveness. For example, I guess everyone here is from technical domain, then we can relate that the square brackets means array, multiple entries could be there. So defining such kind of things, for example, if a particular element has to be mandatory for a particular workflow, a particular information may be, let's suppose, a patient's blood report has to be is a mandatory input for a particular process, surgical process, or any service that has to be given in the hospital. So how to define those kind of requirements, so standardizing those, if everyone understand that, okay, this particular indication means, okay, it is a required field, or this particular indication means, it's an optional field. So standardizing those grammatical rules, and then we call it as syntactic. And the other one is semantic. Semantic is related to terminology or the dictionary that we use for a healthcare system. So as I mentioned about, let's suppose we talked about BP here, that, okay, BP represents blood pressure. It's not something else. Similarly, the codes around gender, some people might refer M as male, some people might refer MALE as a male, or some systems can refer that. Similarly, if we go more complex, as I mentioned, representing cardiac arrest or heart attack, defining terminology around that. So these kind of terminologies or dictionary, defining those dictionary that can be used. Now let's dive a little bit deeper into HL7 FHIR. So when we say FHIR or when we say HL7 FHIR, it means the same thing. So HL7 is an organization which has released different versions or standards, with time. So HL7v2 was one version, then HL7v3 was one version, and then came the HL7 FHIR. So when we say HL7 FHIR, we are not referring to HL7v2. It means FHIR only. It's just the nomenclature for that. So sometimes people ask, why HL7 knowledge is required or not. So HL7 is an organization, it's not a standard. When we want to refer to standard, it is HL7v2 or HL7 FHIR. So when we say HL7 FHIR, it means FHIR only. Now, if we expand the term FHIR, it stands for Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources. Why it is called FHIR? Because compared to previous standards, it is much faster to implement. But since we are not dealing with previous standards, for this course, and plus to learn FHIR, previous standard knowledge is not even required. So we'll skip this part, why it is fast. And the second part is healthcare. because it is relevant in terms of healthcare. That's why this particular term is there. There are two other terms, interoperability and resources. First, understand what interoperability is. So if we again go with the formal definitions, ability of two or more systems or components to exchange information and use the information that has been exchanged. So there are again two components here. One is exchange information and then use of that information. Let's go back to our previous case where system A and system 1 and system 2 wants to exchange information. So if we remove this interface, they might be able to exchange information, but they cannot understand or use the information. For example, as I mentioned, if this is CSV format and this particular system processes XML, so this might accept CSV, but it doesn't know how to process CSV. So it is exchange is happening, but use of information is not happening. Then we will say these two systems are not interoperable with each other. So when it comes to interoperability, there are two aspects. One is exchange, and the other is should be able to use that information. And the other term that we see here is resources. So resources might be a new term with respect to healthcare here. If I compare it with to a day-to-day language, then consider the role of brick in a wall. So the way we can integrate different bricks to achieve a particular design or particular wall or particular structure. Similarly, in FHIR, resources are the minimal independent entity that can exist. So, playing with resources or linking one resource to another, we can achieve a complex workflow. Example, let's suppose a patient arrives at a hospital and wants to get registered or admitted, or just want to see a particular doctor. The administrative department will first ask few demographic details. Demographic details means general questions or knowledge information about patient, such as name, address, then gender, then maybe some IDs if they require. So this is called demographic data of a particular patient, and these data would be stored or exchanged as a resource, and the resource that is used here is the patient resource. So there are different resources to hold different information. So let's this patient resource is created and stored, and then this particular patient is assigned a particular doctor for a particular time. Then this information, who is the doctor and what time has been scheduled for this particular patient, another resource will be created, or another set of values. Let's suppose understand in this way now. Another set of values would be created, and then these two set of values, one which is of patient and one which is of this appointment and doctor, will be related, so that anyone who refers this kind of information knows that okay, this scheduled time for this doctor relates to this particular patient. So this way we can interlink these resources to achieve a much more complex scenario. But as we go along resources through this course, then it will make much more sense when we are working with resources. So a quick example of resources, what it might look like. It might look like something like this here. So the resource type for a patient, so patient is one of the resource. Then similarly, appointment could be one resource. Practitioner, which holds the information of doctor, could be one resource. Then diagnostic report, which is the result from from a lab department, that could be a one resource. So similarly, different resources are there to hold different information. This is one example of it. So these are the elements that FHIR defines. For example, what resource type it is there. This is the value for that. Then what is the birth date for a particular patient. So this is the birth date for a particular patient. And identifier. In identifier, there could be different elements inside this. For example, the actual value. What is the value? For example, if you want to store the value of a passport, then the passport number would be here, and system could be passport. So in this case, MRN is their medical record number, is something unique ID that we have in healthcare to hold a particular patient's ID. Different and again, this is a JSON format. Again, who are new to JSON, please don't worry about that. We'll cover how to work with the JSON. This particular snapshot I have given just to give you an idea how a particular resource would look. So there would be sort of different elements that are defined by FHIR, and then it will have values against it. A few more pointers with respect to introduction to FHIR. For example, FHIR combines best features of previous versions. So again, since we are not dealing with previous versions, we will not go in detail. But just for knowledge, FHIR is based on the learnings from previous versions. So whatever drawbacks or shortcomings were there in previous versions, that has been taken care in FHIR. Second thing, FHIR can coexist with previous versions. So for example, in current healthcare system, if most of the legacy systems are already developed on HL7 V2, then migrating this HL7 V2 to FHIR could be a major cost consuming aspect or work around that one. So FHIR has a way so that FHIR could map it to HL7 V2. FHIR does define these kinds of mappings. So these different versions can coexist in real world, and this FHIR can be used with mobile phone apps, any cloud communications, electronic health record, data sharing, or communication between different servers in large institutions. So coming to FHIR releases, like every other, I would say piece of knowledge, it is built in versions. It is evolving with time. So that's why different versions are released. So there are total 4 versions so far has been released. R5 is still in work. It still is work in progress. What we will go through in this particular course is R4 version, because R4 version is what is considered as stable. In FHIR terms, they are calling it as normative, but let's understand it as it means stable. We'll again relook later what normative means in detail. So R4 is something that is available and considered stable, plus this is widely been accepted around the globe for implementation. So we'll cover R4 only. And in terms of standard, we'll cover JSON. We'll not go with XML or RDF, we'll cover JSON. Again, because JSON is easier to understand compared to XML. This is my personal experience, as well as what I see JSON is much more preferred in future rather than XML. There might be implementation which are working with XML as of now, but compared to JSON and XML, I have seen more implementation in JSON. So that's why we'll go ahead with JSON. So we'll go ahead with R4 in this particular course. And we don't need to understand previous versions to understand R4. If we understand R4, then you will already be in a place to understand previous version. Scope, now as I mentioned, what a healthcare system is correlation or coexistence of different domains. For example, there is clinical care, there is administration, there is research, there is finance. So different I would say mini ecosystems are there that exchange information between each other, and these different domains can be achieved through FHIR. That what it say that FHIR can be used to achieve exchange of information in clinical care, administration, research, or finance. And there are 4 different types of exchange could be possible through FHIR. These 4 different types of exchange could be possible. As a part of this course, we'll cover REST, but just to be aware what others are, let's understand and go through a formal definition and maybe a quick understanding about what these different exchange are. So when we say messaging, messaging is event based. For example, as I took one example that a patient has to be admitted in a particular hospital for a particular reason. So this is an event that has happened, and related to that event, what information could be there? So there is information about the patient, there is information about the doctor, there is information about the scheduled time, there is information about the hospital as well. So the location and which bed or which room it could be. So these different kinds of information are there when we think of an event of a patient admission. So all these set of information is passed or created. This is called messaging when it is event based. Now coming to documents. A document is a complete independent set of information that can give a complete context of healthcare episode. For example, from a hospital, a patient is being discharged. So whatever reports, whatever comments, or whatever prescriptions a particular patient gets at the time of discharge. So this whole document is independent in itself. If a patient carries this set of information or set of documents from one hospital to another, or one practitioner to another, the another practitioner, which is doctor, another doctor would be able to relate what this whole information is about. So this is independent. It might not need any other references to complete that information. So this is where documents come into picture, and FHIR resources can be used to create such documents, and FHIR resources can be used to create such event-based messages. Then services. Services, I would say, how would I? Okay, let's take an example from billing system or insurance provider. Let's suppose I have subscribed to a particular healthcare insurance, and they provide one service that every month or every quarterly or maybe every year I'll get a particular report which tells me how much amount I have claimed for what particular disease or what particular medical condition, and how much bandwidth I have to claim more. Although in real world I don't think this kind of service still exists. You have to call to your vendor and then talk to them. Okay, can I claim this particular amount again for a particular this particular condition, and they will then give you the information. I don't think this service exists, but this could be one possibility where every quarterly you get a report that okay, your total claim for this year is this so far, and for this medical condition this amount is pending, and you can claim it next time. So automatically every quarterly or every monthly or maybe annually you will get that report. So in the backend, what the system would be doing, the system would be fetching some information related to you. For example, your hospital information, your medical condition information, maybe OPD billing details could be there, or lab reports or lab testing billing details could be there. So it fetches in the background this information, and maybe they send this information from their system to your mobile app in terms of FHIR resources, and then you will be able to view those. So services based implementation can be possible through FHIR. Now coming to REST. So one thing that is common between these three types is that these contains a set of information, a combination of information. As I mentioned, in messaging there is information about patient, there is information about appointment, there is information about doctor. Similarly, in documents there is information about allergies, maybe there is information about prescriptions, there is information about lab reports. And again, in services there could be information about billing, there could be information about healthcare service that has been provided. So it contains combination of information. In REST, you can have a combination of resources, or you can deal altogether with only one piece of information independently. This is what makes it powerful. For example, let's suppose a patient went to a hospital and has been registered and get has an appointment with the doctor and then came back, and maybe a few days later he realized that okay, some of my details I have entered incorrectly. Maybe let's suppose the middle name is missing and he forgot to mention that, or maybe the hospital might have asked some documents, maybe PAN card, Aadhaar card, if we talk about Indian healthcare, or maybe in US we talk about SSN, or maybe license number, and he has forgot to update that, or may have updated incorrectly, and he want to change that. So until and unless that person again has a chance to visit the hospital for any reason, then only it will be updated. What if he can at home update his patient details only without hampering or disturbing any other piece of information? So that can be done through REST. So REST allows us to play with these resources independently, and that what makes it more powerful. That what makes it more independent of one information to another, and this is what we'll cover in this session. And one more thing, databases. Although we see today's databases to store information in tabular format, but again, these resources itself can be stored in the backend directly instead of converting into this tabular format, and whenever we fetch back, then convert back into resources. So instead of that tabular formats, resources can be directly used or stored in the backend. Now, why FHIR? There, as I mentioned, there could multiple standard. Why FHIR? Why we have to use FHIR? This section might be relevant if we are aware about previous version, but again, since we are not dealing with any other versions, so we'll not dive deep into those. But still, let's try to analyze what are advantages of FHIR. If you're working with FHIR, why we should be going ahead with FHIR. So first is a strong focus on implementation. It is fast and easy to implement. Why it is fast and easy to implement? The first thing that has been taken care is the format. For example, someone who is not working with healthcare might have worked with JSON or might have worked with XML. So it's easier, it reduces the learning curve. While previous version, for example, HL7V2, if I show you, this is one example of it. And if I show you to someone who is first time getting introduced to healthcare or healthcare standard, this is what HL7V2 looks like, and this is what FHIR looks like. So I guess even from a very fresh perspective, I am relating more to this information rather than this one. I am not sure what PID means, what MSH means, what NK1 means. But when I say this information, I can understand, okay, identifier could be identifier of a patient. Okay, this element could have information of a birth date of a particular patient. So FHIR takes care of that the learning curve to learn FHIR is reduced compared to previous versions. This is more complex. This is much more easy to relate to real worlds or most technologies or practices that are going around in developer community. It is free and has no restrictions. So HL7V2, the previous versions were paid standards. I'm not sure it is still paid or free. I think it is free. Let me. Gautam, I guess you might know that HL7V2 is free or paid as of now.
I think it's free. Anybody can use it.
Yeah. So what I am aware of this is that after FHIR, HSNV2 got free because that was a condition from the FHIR community that will release FHIR, will do it public. Only HSNV2 is also public. So that was a condition when FHIR was introduced. So from there on, HSNV2 got also free. Then it has XML, JSON, then the RESTful architectures. So RESTful that we have seen that we can play around with CRUD operations. Then apart from representing this information in terms of XML and JSON, there is human readable format also. So I have not mentioned it here in this particular snapshot, but there is one more element. We call it as text or narrative, and that will have that information that is relevant to a non-technical person. He can read out that information and can figure out, okay, what this particular resource will or is about, what kind of information it holds. So even though a non-technical person is referring to it, he can make a sense out of it. That aspect is also there. We'll move to FHIR website and try to understand that. So this would be a first introduction to our FHIR. So the reference page that I am comfortable with to start with FHIR is this particular page. So this particular page has all the versions, previous versions that FHIR has released. So DST1, DST2, similarly ST3, these are previous versions of FHIR. And if you come to this section, there are two redirected links here. One is current and one is this particular version. So this is related to R4 as of now. Whenever if R4 becomes stable, then this would be replaced by R5. But currently R4 is there. There is another link that is there, which is called current. So this is a working branch. So FHIR community is continuously working on this and updating it. So if you open it today, and if you open it a month later or a week later, you might see some changes there. So that's why this is not suggested to use this particular branch for your implementation. Always prefer this one or any other previous versions which has already been seized. The reason this comes handy because all systems are not yet implemented R4. If some systems or vendors have already started using ST3 or previous versions of FHIR, so in those cases you might have to come here and relook into previous versions and then maybe map it to R4 if that is a requirement, or process previous versions only. So as I mentioned, if you understand R4, you will be in a position to understand previous versions as well. So let's understand R4 as of now. So this is what a home page of R4 looks like. It says release R4 here. This is from where you can get it to know which version you're working with. And then there are different kinds of introductions based on which user has ended up on this particular page. For example, if a developer wants a quick introduction about FHIR, then from development perspective, how introduction of FHIR looks like. So if you click on that, you will be able to go through the FHIR from your mindset. Similarly, a clinical person, for example, a doctor, maybe nurse, or just a hospital administrative staff wants to go through this particular information and wants to get introduced to FHIR, then he may reference this to understand FHIR. This will be explaining FHIR in his or her understanding perspective. Similarly, if an architect wants to understand FHIR, then you can redirect to this particular link and read about FHIR. So we'll cover all these four one by one, somewhere during the course, and understand FHIR bit, from different perspectives. The other things that could be relevant to us at this stage is XML and JSON. So if you are new to XML and JSON, you can click on these particular links and understand about it. Anyway, for JSON, we'll cover as a part of this course only. But still, if you want to have more detailed knowledge, you can click on this and it will tell you how a JSON should like, what are rules around JSON, while working with FHIR, and in general, how a JSON looks like. Then we'll cover these one by one. Again, what REST APIs are supported. When we say REST APIs, the CRUD operations, create, read, update, or delete, these kind of APIs. Then the search, how a particular information, medical information can be searched or queried, from the backend in terms of FHIR specification. So those rules would be there. Again, we'll cover this, when we move along with the course. We'll cover structure definition, capability statement, and different words that you see here. How security and privacy is maintained. What are the guidelines of FHIR around that? We'll cover that as well. Then some yeah, so these are different domains and few resources related to that. So from here you can, if you belong to administrative section or domain, then these resources could be more of relevance to you. If you are doing or implementing any medication related interface or piece of code, you're writing any piece of information for a medication, then these kind of resources could be relevant to you. If you're dealing with financial domain, then these resources could be relevant to you. Again, we'll cover few of these resources one by one, so that we have a knowledge about these, and then we will also try to interlink these resources. For example, how a claim is related to account, how a claim is related to coverage, and then how appointment is related to patient or practitioner, then how a medication is related to, let's suppose, any diagnostic report, and then how allergies are related for a particular medication or maybe particular immunization, and what could be family history of a patient, what service request has been requested by a patient or a doctor for a particular patient. So those things will play around and interlink those. So this is a quick overview of FHIR website. From here, you can navigate to different details of information from here. And one more thing, this is a question for in a certification perspective. The question is, what is the most accepted practice for proposal change? For example, if you are not in alignment with any of these and you want to propose a change, then this is something here. A link is there. You can click on this and submit your proposal. What has to be changed and why it has to be changed. There are other links as well that are mentioned here, but will not cover everything just to avoid any confusions. But as we move along, we'll cover most of this information that is available on this page. And if I call about resources, so this is the tab that has resources mentioned. I'll categorize, I'll see it as alphabetical mode. So these are 145 resources so far that FHIR has defined so far. So for example, account information, this is specifically bank account information from where billing has to be done. Then appointment related information, allergy intolerance. Similarly, you could see family member history. Then coverage, this is related to insurance coverage. Then location of hospital or where the patient has been admitted. Different information related person, I would say contact person for a patient, who has to be contacted in terms of emergencies. So this will have those informations. Then I could see service request, what service has been requested, for example, whether a CT scan or a blood test report, or maybe urine testing has been requested. So those are those different information. So to store different information, different resources are defined. To work with these resources is what we will see in our future sessions.
Do you know what the N means? Is it new or what is it?
So N means normative.
Normative.
Yeah. So for now, let's understand normative means stable. But again, you see other figures as well: 2, 0, 3, 3, 1.
Okay.
So these are different levels of maturity that this particular these resources has gone through. So when we say N, it means it has reached its highest evolution. For example, if you want to implement adverse event, then in that case you can expect much more changes in future versions. So there could be breakthrough changes as well. So whenever you are implementing a particular resource, make sure you see the maturity level and then decide whether you want to go for it or not. Because if you are implementing any 0 or maybe 1, then be prepared that future versions will have mega changes that might impact our implementation. While if you go for something that has N mentioned against it, it means it will be backward compatible and you will not see any breakthrough changes.
Got it.
Yeah. But we'll cover this again in detail one by one. Apart from this, I guess for just introducing FHIR, this is where I leave as of now, because from here on we'll dive into FHIR, and it's better if we start tomorrow to understand further. Any questions I'll take up if anything is coming onto your mind.
So this is a FHIR certification, it's there, right? So anything, can you give some basic insight like what that examination is about and what?
Yeah.
Basically, as a technical person, what is the usefulness for me actually for that point of view?
So you want to understand about how you can go about FHIR certification?
Yeah, and how it is useful in my career actually.
Okay.
Frankly speaking, getting a certification because it's a very good business from the certification industry.
Yes,
so
that's true.
I have that perspective, but just want to understand what are the benefits of getting as a individually getting that examination and getting certification.
Yes. So let's suppose you have two candidates interviewing for a job, and you are the one who is interviewing them, and both have same amount of knowledge. So it is, I guess, go by human nature that who has certified is something that you will pick. If we talk about skill set level. So in that respect, certification will give you an advantage. But again, since FHIR is new to the world, FHIR certification is not much of an importance as of now. The only thing that gives advantage to you as that your interviewer might itself not know FHIR, and they might not be able to ask a relevant question. But if you have FHIR certification in your pocket, then they can trust you more compared to another candidate. So this is one advantage that I see, and plus down the line as it goes, certification will become might become acceptable, but again it depends on requirement to requirement basis. For example, if you are opting for a role where you have to talk about FHIR, then in that case certification might become important. But if you have to implement FHIR, then certification might not become that much important, because hands-on knowledge is something that is more preferred in that case. So whether it will add value, yes, it can give you a competitive edge over other candidates. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sure. So
Yeah.
basically, it's a very good amount involved in certification.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to have. It's good to have.
Yeah, and it's really worth actually. I'm just trying to figure out. Now, getting knowledge is important for me right
Yes,
now.
definitely. Yeah.
Learn certification.
Yes. So anyway, you might have seen that few statements I have highlighted in green. So this is where we can suggest any changes. So I have mentioned that propose a change. Then I think I have highlighted few things. Okay, so this is segment is highlighted in green. This particular statement is highlighted in green. So whatever throughout the course you'll see that is highlighted in green, it means it is relevant with respect to certification. And in this particular course I'll definitely point it out. Even if I don't point it out, be assured that anything that has been highlighted as green is something relevant from a certification perspective. But the reason I don't want to get into certification perspective as of now, because then it will become more theoretical, and the more priority as of now what I understand is that to understand FHIR and how you can implement it. So I'll take that as a priority. But whenever we come across some piece of knowledge that is relevant from for the certification, then I'll definitely point it out. If in case I have forgot about it, then be assured that if it is highlighted in green, it means it's a good candidate to read about certification. Yeah. So
One more question regarding the assignment you refer. Kind of like assignment theoretical nature in the like we have to write down content, or it's something different level of adding the intent assignment intention actually, like how is that assignment is
so assignments would be, for example, let's suppose we have seen these number of resources. So when we have done a quick introduction to how resources are created, for example, if I open let's open any relatable resource, because patient is something that everyone can relate. Let's open this resource. So this is the different elements that it can contain, and it would be in JSON format. So first thing is we'll see how this information can be converted into a JSON format by looking at here. Then how will I know that what piece of information would go in this particular element? And what is the valid for example, this contains birth date. Then what is the valid format for a birth date? We'll understand those kind of rules and regulations. So once we go through the theoretical aspect of it, and I'll also show you in the sessions how to create a JSON out of it, a valid JSON out of it. And the assignment would be that I'll give you a particular scenario, and you will be able to create a JSON out of it. So whatever I'm covering in the session as theoretical is something so that you have opportunity to practice it. The assignments would be on that.
okay.
Yeah.
Got
So
it.
otherwise, if I keep on talking, you might not be able to relate it. Once you do a hands-on, you will be able to integrate it. For example, you see a lot of information here. For example, identifier, then what this terms means, then what 0 to star means, what is this identifier, and these descriptions are there. Then you see some links here. Then you see these values here, what these values are. So once you do such assignments, then you will be able to integrate everything that is mentioned. Yeah, so that's all I have for today for introductory session. If there are any other questions that we can cover.
Sure. I have one question. So what is your experience with FHIR, or you have worked with implementing any interfaces using FHIR, or what is your, I mean, I missed the earlier introduction, but sorry,
Okay.
asking again, maybe. I just want to know what your experience and have you done any
Yes,
work
yes.
or implemented interfaces with that, and what's your broad view on this FHIR interfaces or FHIR implementation?
Okay. So I have been working with healthcare interoperability from last 6+ years, or that will be almost 7 in July. And that involves working with FHIR implementation, HL7 V2 implementation, then the mappings from HL7 V2 to FHIR and the vice versa. Then mapping the custom formats, as I mentioned about that, custom XML. In our session, we took the example of CSV, that a particular system could be using CSV. So those custom formats into FHIR, those kind of mappings I have done. Then then building or constructing a FHIR layer. For example, current implement FHIR is new to us or new to the world, and there are systems who has already been developed and they don't understand FHIR. So creating that FHIR layer in between, so that that communication is enabling. So those kind of implementation expertise I do have, and I'm also FHIR certified as well. I'm also HSN B2 certified as well. So yes, to understand your question, I have started training a lot later, and I have been not later by means, I guess maybe 1.5 year back I have started training sessions. But before that, I was totally technical guy, and I'm still a technical guy. I still implement these details. Currently, I'm working with IHE profiles. If you are aware that terms, so IHE profiles are something that are much more relevant with respect to US healthcare system. So yes, I do have implementation knowledge about FHIR and other standards. CDA I also have worked, but very basic knowledge.
Okay. Do you use any interface engine, or do you have any
Uh, I
in-house or
so
framework for this?
I have experience on Rhapsody. Mirth,
Rhapsody.
Mirth have introductory knowledge. It never got into practice of me, so I'll not claim expertise on that. But just for my curiosity, I have explored that.
Okay.
But yeah, but I don't claim that kind of expertise with Mirth. Rhapsody, I'm quite used to. You work with Rhapsody earlier?
I initially worked with Rhapsody. I like built a basic interfaces, but not much deep into the Rhapsody. I did certification on Rhapsody, but never got a chance to work more depth into building more of interfaces, where it was a very standard
Mhm.
troubleshooting or monitoring
Yes,
the
yeah,
interfaces.
yeah.
So not a hands-on experience with Rhapsody, but I do did work with Mirth Connect, so I'm working with currently with Mirth Connect.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, I just want to know more on how the FHIR. I mean, I'm looking more on the FHIR side.
Okay,
So
okay. Yeah. So since you're
and
already aware of such terminologies, then you might have heard about FHIR servers as well. So Happy FHIR is one terminology that you might have came across.
yes,
So
so I'm like going through a lot of things, but it doesn't really make sense until I
yes,
think I've started learning and get more understanding of what's FHIR and how we can implement. And
yes,
I know people use a lot of different frameworks, APIs, and stuff. So I'm not into that expertise level of doing a lot of. I'm basically just more of using a JavaScript
Mhm.
in a real world for the Mirth Connect to do any of the transformations or translations or any mappings.
Mhm.
But FHIR seems to be a new interesting thing, and most of the current health standards are using FHIR and trying to go onto the FHIR side of implementing, or
Yeah,
trying to explore at least most
yeah,
of the cases. So I just want to have a heads up over there and see how I can improve myself.
yeah.
And
So
my other question is, do you have any of the self-learning videos for this as well? I just want to time constrain some of the during any of the sessions. Is there any such case where I cannot able to attend the sessions? Do you have any self-learning videos for the FHIR?
yes, so after every session, Srinivas will share you the recordings of that. If not every session,
Mhm.
maybe you can request him if he forgets, or otherwise, maybe once we cover few sessions, he might share with you.
Okay, cool.
So the point is every session will be recorded, and it will be shared with you. And plus, I'll also share the PPTs that I'll be using throughout the course.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Uh,
One more question last. I am running out of time. So basically, are you going to share any other material like other than PPT? There's some just on the day I was asking, right?
So PPT as well as recordings would be there.
Okay.
Yeah, and assignments would be attached to PPTs as well. For example, if I thought of giving some assignment for today, but I thought it would be much more. So I'll just attach, like I have attached this particular snapshot on this particular slide. I'll attach assignments in the PPTs as well, so you will always have access to them.
So PPT are downloadable, recording downloadable, or how it will be?
It will be shared to you through email. PPTs will be shared to your email, and recordings will upload in Drive and give you access.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
Thank you. How to pronounce your first name?
You can address me as Kumar.
Kumar. Okay.
I find that people find it difficult, so let's keep it Kumar.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to pronounce. Just at least help us to pronounce your first name.
Okay, so it's Chidambar.
Chitambar.
Chidambar.
Okay.
Yeah, you might have heard of Chidambaram.
Chidambar. I was just thinking from that perspective.
Yeah. So I have been addressed as Chidambaram a lot because that's what people are used to. Then I stopped and all that. Okay, if you want to address me, at least address me by my surname, but I'll not hear myself by someone else's name.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So we have discussed quite a few terminologies: Mirth, then FHIR server, then Rhapsody. To those to whom these are totally new, please don't be worried about such things. These will not impact this particular session. FHIR would be totally focused. So this session would be, these courses would be totally focused on FHIR, and whatever is required to learn this FHIR, we will cover it. So no new extra knowledge would be required from external perspective. Okay, guys, we'll catch up tomorrow then at the same time.
Sure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.
Just a last question before we end. So usually sessions will be an hour, or I
Yes.
saw that in the spreadsheet you are mentioning as 2.5 hours. So it will be, the topic will be covered in 2.5 hours.
Yes, they are. So per day we'll have 1 hour session, maybe plus minus 5 minutes. That goes, for example, today it went 14 minutes, but I guess that's fine since this is our first session. But it will be around 1 hour. And then if some session has mentioned 2.5 hours, it means that will divide in different sessions, that topic.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Kumar.
Okay.
And
thank you. Thank you for attending, and we'll catch up tomorrow. Have a nice day.
See you guys.
Vijay, you have raised your hand.
No, it was earlier. I forgot.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.